All right, hello and welcome. Today I have with a guest from Algeria. Introduce yourself.
Of course. Hi. My name is Elkhansaa. I work in project management currently. I have a small podcast called elPerspective, in which I try to speak as much as possible about Algeria, about education, about the things that I learn about my own society, about the things that I learn about foreign societies as well. I sometimes try to make the comparison and break stereotypes that we are familiar with in our culture. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No worries. So I still have a lot of episodes, but uh, I listened to the whole thing, and I was really impressed with how you did the episode because you were just talking by yourself. You didn't have a guest, and you were introducing these big topics that people argue about a lot, and you were like explaining them and then giving these examples as to what each means and doing comparisons. So if people that listen to my podcast, if you guys are into like politics and different topics around that, just give it a listen. I'll link it in the description. So you're a project manager. Can I ask what the product is that you're managing?
Well, not a product, but projects, essentially mostly related to training, coaching, entrepreneurship, and corporate training. So I work for a large Algerian corporation where we draft, develop, and implement projects that kind of use in knowledge management, find problems within, or find the need for training. And then develop pieces of training um, that are designed accordingly, to the needs of that specific corporation, taking into consideration all of the expertise and that lays within that company.
Understood. And one of the topics that I kind of wanted to talk about today is education, specifically education in Algeria. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because you're one of the people that I knew while I was staying there that had been through the education system from start to finish. You did a lot of things, and it was very admirable to see your resolve in keeping going with that. So the question that I have is, what is the education system like in Algeria? How like what is the progress? You usually in America, like we have primary school and then high school, and then you go to university. So could you kind of like run us through the system a little bit?
Okay, so very generally. Yeah, we have a primary school for 5 years, and we do have preschool, but it's not mandatory for everyone. And then we have middle school for 4 years, and then we have high school for 3 years, at the end of which you pass one exam that's called the BAC. And when the score is on 20, and so the average is 10. When you score a minimum of 10, you get to go to university, and the university that you enter is based on the score. So I think this is an interesting discussion point where it's very different from the United States, and maybe also very different from many other developed countries, where we don't really have to go through interviews or write motivation letters or have to do volunteering or anything. We just pass the BAC. We get an average of a minimum of 10, and based on that average, you choose the university in which you continue your higher education, if you want to go through with that. We also have vocational training, and going back to university, you get 3 years for a bachelor's and 2 years for a master's. We have a first master's and a second master's for each year. And then vocational training, I would say vocational training, anyone can actually enter. You don't even need to graduate middle school. But I would say that mostly Algerians are not interested in vocational training. We have very, very low participation levels. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's essentially it.
So there's a couple questions that I wanted to ask here that are kind of a bit off topic, but one of them is the BAC exam. So high school in Algeria, from my perspective as somebody that went there, it's a lot more intense in terms of the topics that you learn and how advanced some of them are, especially in my chosen field, which was biology and science. So that's another thing that we do that I don't see in other countries, is that we specialize early in high school. So in high school, you get to choose between literature and science, and then each year you get more and more specialized.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that system? Do you think it's an effective system from your perspective?
Unfortunately not. No, I do not think that is very effective. I obviously think that to any system we gain a lot and we lose a lot. And in this very specific system, I think we do lose more than we gain. And I think the problem with this, and the one major problem that the Algerian education system suffers from, is the problem of orientation. As you just said, teenagers are asked to choose a major from a very, very young age. So you're 15 years old and you have to choose whether you're going to study philosophy, literature, or finance, or science. And the problem, like, if you choose and you are flexible to change your major in the future, then that's all right. I think people would not be too limited. But the thing is that if you choose at 15 to study philosophy, there is no way you can study something else when you go to university or a couple of years later, unless you want to redo all of the years. And so yes, it's very limiting. It's not flexible at all. So that is an extreme problem. I think it's very it's against what any human needs really in their lives, especially early on in their well, not only educational development, but overall development of their brains. So yeah, it's very limiting from this aspect. I think it's one very nice strong point is that, as you said, it's very rich in information for pupils that study and actually manage to keep up to date with the lessons. We learned a lot. We learned a lot of incredibly important things. We learned a lot about the history of Algeria, the history of the world. We learned incredibly interesting information about biology. But if you are a pupil that is not necessarily academically inclined, then your talents would kind of be wasted um, on learning in this manner. Plus, there isn't really a lot of room for sports, for competition, for art, and because all of the time is taken in focusing on these information, focusing on learning about mostly information, not much critical thinking, I would say. So yeah, in a nutshell, very very generally, I would say these are the most important three aspects to take into consideration when thinking about the strong and weak points of the Algerian education system overall.
So from my perspective, because I got last year quit. I didn't finish my education. I did online. I didn't do it in the education system. I do get your point. It is so. I initially, when I went to high school, I wanted to go into literature and philosophy. That was my main drive at the time. And my family sort of influenced me to go into sciences. And
Science.
I was very bitter about it at the beginning. But
Mhm.
now that when I sit with people that have like a university education or a master's or even PhDs, I'm able to carry on a conversation with them because of the amount of information that I picked up in high school in my science courses. Like I have a lot of very difficult, knowledge. For example, calculus, which in America I don't think starts really until university.
Mhm.
So this extreme um, this extreme focus on getting people to like be very good at something, it does produce like very good minds and it produces a lot of casualties in terms of people don't actually they're not able to finish because they make the wrong choice, and then going back from that, like you said, is very improbable.
Mhm.
Um,
Actually,
I
I
kind of
know.
wanted to also go ahead.
Sorry, should have. I actually, in relation to calculus, I do think that Americans learn the basics of calculus in high school, limits and integrals, I would say. But yeah, to point out that we definitely go more into depth with math in high school, where there's a lot of charge. Yeah, there's a lot of charge in the system, I would say.
I kind of I kind of get it, and at the same time, I all of it. But it's good to hear your opinion since you're way more integrated into the system than I am. I wanted to also talk to you about university for a second. So this is what I remember. I'm not sure if it's true. I think that while you're going to university in Algeria, you actually get paid by the government. Is that still the case?
Yeah, we call it La Bourse. We get approximately 3,000 dinars, which is enough to buy, I would say, five lunches, five to, depending on the type of lunch that you're paying for yourself. I would say six fancy lunches. Um, Okay, I yeah, we do get paid. Well, not everyone actually. When you're submitting the file for La Bourse, you kind of have to put la fiche de paie, with the payment paper of your parents. And so if your parents are kind of rich, you sometimes wouldn't be eligible for une bourse. And if they are a bit middle class, then yes, you would get une bourse, but it's not the same amount as someone else that doesn't, whose parents don't have money. Yeah.
Um, that makes sense. So that's a big difference, though, between the North African system, I think, in general. Well, we'll just speak about Algeria, but that's a big difference between Algeria and how we do it in the West. Because over here, you kind of have to pay for university most of the times,
Mm,
unless you get a scholarship, which is a very rare occurrence. And then there's a whole bunch of politics around the system and how it's bad for the people that are going through it in terms of, you leave university, whether you finish it or not, whether you have a job or not, with a lot of debt. And I
yeah.
think that could be very restrictive towards you. Um, so what is the economical outlook for somebody that goes to university in Algeria and then they finish, let's say, or they get to the end of it? What's their experience like? What is the job market like?
hmm okay, so I would say that first of all, obviously Algerians are very comfortable going into university. There is absolutely no financial problem there whatsoever. But and just to speak a bit further about La Bourse, I obviously understand that it's extremely different from what is done in North America generally. Well, the United States mainly. Um, knowing that the economic model is extremely capitalist in the USA. Um, a couple of years ago, I would say that I was against La Bourse. I used to say, no, Algerians should pay minimum amounts for university at least, and not only and not get paid. And okay, if we're not going to pay for university, we at least not get paid and use the money to ameliorate the environments in which we study. Because obviously, if you have an educational system that you don't pay for, then you don't necessarily have the best quality, you don't have the best comfort, um, you don't have everything that you need. Sometimes the computers are commodities. The computers are sometimes very very slow, they're very old. Lunch isn't that well. Lunch, for example, is practically free inside of universities. Um, and it's of a low quality most of the time, obviously. Uh, I would say that sometimes the classes aren't very comfortable, but I mean they are of a certain level. I really do not want to describe the environment to be extremely bad. I mean for taking into consideration the fact that we don't pay for everything for anything. The environment is actually pretty decent. It's not that good. It's not extremely bad, and it had been getting better over the past years. So as I was saying, I was against La Bourse, and then I realized that some people, some Algerians, if they don't have this small amount of money, um, they will face a lot of difficulties in their lives in terms of even the basic necessities like food or water or having a one pair of shoes to go around, and knowing also that transportation to university and from university is free for almost all students. And so we have a large system of transportation only for students that take from university to very specific areas, sometimes very far away from university, for anyone that cannot pay for their transportation. Obviously, if you don't pay for anything, that maybe the quality isn't that good. No, so a lot of students use these buses at the same time, and so um, uh, the standard of living isn't for students is not very high. But yeah, then I realized that people need this because we live in an economic system that doesn't allow flexibility in terms of making your own money. These students, if they're not getting paid by the government for studying, they don't have time to work. They don't have work opportunities. They don't have parents um, that can well share or give money, the needed amounts of money for these students to continue studying. And so we would, if we actually stop giving money to these students, we would end up losing much more than we gain. But I'm definitely for reforming and ensuring that we give the right amount of money to the right people, to the right students, alongside kind of starting to create work opportunities, so that the students that don't need the money, or that are capable or able to work, would actually be able to work. So yeah, Sherif, can you please repeat the rest of the question?
So the rest of the question, well, first you make a lot of good access. So people in North Africa and Algeria have a lot of access to the education system and all of these different things that are built around it, like free food, small payments from the government, free transportation. And even though there is a sacrifice in quality, I think that produces a lot more students that are highly educated. I think that in Algeria, there's like a very high percentage of women that are actually going to university in
More
comparison
than
to
men.
other countries. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, more than men actually. One of the highest levels
Yeah.
of women enrollment in higher education in
Which
Africa.
is a huge contrast in terms of
Yeah.
like Algeria is like a culturally Islamic country, and if you look around, that's a huge contrast between other countries around it, which I find very impressive, and it is due to this like great social system. Even though it's imperfect, it's still pretty good. It's still motivational, in my opinion.
Mhm.
The other question that I had is the economic outlook for people that do end up going to university and finishing it. Like when they finish, what kind of jobs do they have access to? What is the outlook on their future? Do they have access to a good economy? Is there a way for them to start businesses? Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense, of course. Um, Okay, the Algerian economy is one of the strongest economies in Africa. There is access to opportunity, of course. I mean, if you're an American, you're comparing the Algerian economy to the American economy. You're comparing and I would say more of an authoritarian environment than extremely well the definition of what a liberal what a liberal and a capitalist economy is like. So there is a huge contrast between what is available in Algeria in terms of opportunities in the job market and the United States. But with that being said, to answer your question as accurately as I can, I have to go back to the problem that we've spoken about a couple of minutes ago, which was the problem of orientation. This is actually one of the problems that I currently work on. We're trying to collect data about this, and essentially, students in the Algerian education system are given very few opportunities to choose their path. They well your university major is chosen based on one exam. When you're in high school as well, at 15 years old, at 16 years old, you choose a major that you're stuck with for the rest of your life. And so many people don't have parents that are understanding enough or that are educated enough about well, first of all psychology to know how to push their kids forward in their lives. And so, for example, for your parents held you from going into philosophy, and that's the case with a lot of parents, because there's this also cultural these cultural rules that also dictate with which majors these students are supposed to enter. So studying philosophy and literature is not as good, is not as wanted as studying science, because all Algerians prefer to be engineers and all Algerians prefer to study science. And so if your parents are even if your parents are not well, it's worse if your parents didn't go to universities, or they're not really familiar, or they don't work. If your mother, for example, is a stay-at-home mom, she doesn't really thoroughly understand what it's like to work in the job market in Algeria, so that she doesn't really understand what types of jobs are needed. And I would say that also many Algerians are very confused onto what types of jobs are actually available. And so yeah, you get a lot of problems in relation to this. And then you have different students. You have a large number of students studying science and graduating in that, and there is not enough job opportunities for these people studying in these majors, because very simply the number of jobs available in the job market is much less than what the university is producing each year. And here we can, in addition to the fact that we have an orientation problem, we have the problem of a lack of connection between universities and actors in the ecosystem, in corporations or small businesses or companies or whatever, or the government within itself, actually. And this lack of connection introduces this imbalance. And so Algerian students graduating, most of them do not find jobs in the majors that they've studied in. That, as I said, because of a lack of connection, because of problem of an orientation. Sometimes people at the end of their educational career realize, or even early on, like first year, second year into university, you decide that you don't want to study math anymore, and you don't really have any other option. You cannot change your major. If you change major, you will have to redo. You will have to start from scratch, and so the majority of people, and even if you actually decide to do that, there is absolutely no one will offer you any type of help to change into a better major, or at least a suitable major for yourself, because there's zero orientation involved in high school or university. And so yeah, this is the point that I would personally, unfortunately, say that it's extremely problematic. and it's here where there's almost absolutely no organization. I hope that answers the question.
That does answer the question. So there's two criticisms that I can take here. One is how the world, specifically the Western world, treats Algeria, and then the second is how Algeria treats itself. I'll start with the criticism over the Western world. So there's a strategy in economic, sort of like, I guess, modern warfare called brain drain. Have you ever heard of this term?
I think I did, yes.
So what ends up happening is that countries, whatever, I'm not going to name a specific country because it's not necessarily their fault, but they will look at a specific country that is maybe less than ideal economic outlooks, and it'll provide the best of those people easy access and easy relocation and jobs in their countries in the West. So let's say somebody studies pharmacy in Algeria. They get to a certain point where, let's say, they just started working for some Algerian business in their chosen field, but then they will have access to all of these opportunities in France or in the UK or in the United States or Canada, and then all of the best people of each of these industries gets taken away and is made to work in different countries because that's where the economic outlook is better for them and for their families. And so this is one problem that I see that is really messing us up. And I can even say this from personal experience. Most of my family that is very highly educated and in, specialized engineering fields all live and work outside of Algeria. They send money back home, but they're not really producing anything for the country. The second criticism that I'm going to have to take, or it's just something that people need to start looking at, is that there needs to be a sense of entrepreneurship in Algeria to produce new businesses that will capture all of these people that are leaving university with high skill levels and put them to use. I can understand maybe that there's not enough capital to do that on a large scale at the moment, but I think that it's a process that needs to get started. I don't know if people have already went and started this and people are trying to make this work, but from my memories of living there and going through the education system there, this is something that I highly criticized even 5 or 10 years ago. Do you know if this is changing in terms of like entrepreneurship and business in Algeria?
Yes, I know a lot of that actually. The past, I would say, the past 5 years, 4 years or so, have always have all been very closely interconnected with this aspect. Actually, there is an ever growing, incredibly accelerated rate of aspect of entrepreneurship in Algeria. We have created a new ministry. It's called the Ministry of اقتصاد المعرفة and startups, and so knowledge economy and startups. And we have a minister and a lot of events going around of encouraging young people to start their businesses and start and kick off their startups. And there's an investment fund, and the many corporations and industries are taking part of this. But this growing market is still developing. It's still fairly new, a couple of years in. With what what I would criticize is that, unfortunately, the main focus right now is on preparing no is on organizing events and taking pictures and saying, hey, we're entrepreneurs. There's still, in terms of results, a very very limited amount of results. And I think that's because we didn't succeed in organizing the launch. There is still also always a problem of connection between the stakeholders within the economy. The potential participants, the young people and the smart people and the people that have the ideas, and the stakeholders within the private sector. And so there's I believe in so many projects that have been launched. The problem is there. The problem is in a lack of connection, in a lack of information. Young people don't know where to go, don't know what to do. There isn't much help in guiding these young people through their startups, and some of the admittedly some of these startup ideas or the entrepreneurial ideas that we have been seeing since the very start have not been very revolutionary, have not succeeded in solving the problems that we have. And I think that might be because we didn't fully understand the problems that we have. So for example, if we have problems in the agriculture sector, the new ideas or the new businesses don't necessarily solve them, because there is either a problem, we have a problem of resources. These people are not smart enough, which I don't believe in. I think not only Algeria, but there are resources everywhere. Humans are smart by nature. Then there is a problem in understanding the problem itself. And I think this is a part of it, not the only, obviously not the only part of the problem, but it's I would say to a 40% extent or so, an important aspect to focus on.
Um, I recall when I was living there, I left around 2016, 17, somewhere around that time.
Hmm.
One of the things that we kind of talked about before this podcast is that the Algerian system is sort of inclined to be self-sufficient and to build everything internally over getting stuff from outside. So one of the opportunities that we have that is extremely unique on the world scale is that every country already has all of these convenience applications like Uber Eats, whatever, some educational apps. There's all of these applications that are being used outside of the country that do not have their counterparts in Algeria. So there's a value in just looking out and seeing, okay, so there's this app that lets you send boxes from here to there. Eventually, there are going to be people that own trucks that are going to make this their full-time job, and this is a whole industry that can sprout out of this very, very simple technological idea that people can easily implement. And again, I left in 2016, 2017, so I don't know what the progress looks like in this place. Could you talk a bit about that? Are we this internally?
Yes, actually, yeah, of course. No, when I didn't understand your question in this manner, the present question. We do have an Uber equivalent. It's called. We have multiple Uber equivalents. Actually, the most successful one is Yasser, and it's 100% Algerian. It's extremely successful. It was the first that hit the market, and it's this same service as Uber, and it's available across Algeria now. Also have Hitch. I'm not sure if Hitch is Algerian. I think, but they have a headquarters here, of course. There is Karim. Karim is this also a same application as I'm mentioning this because it's interesting to a certain extent, because Karim wasn't as successful as Yasser. It's a company. It's a startup that's actually Middle Eastern, and it wasn't as successful here because apparently Algerians, well, obviously, everyone would go for the whatever the first solution hit the market, but also I personally believe that people prefer Yasser because it's Algerian, and Karim when it hit the market here, they made a couple of mistakes. For example, if you try to book a car ride on the application, and you annul and you cancel, you will get taxed. And this is something that Algerians are extremely unfamiliar with. And I think that must be one of the first things that repulsed Algerians away from this application. We have Jumia also. Jumia is actually, I think, sub-Saharan African. I think, yeah. So it's in relation to everything that's related to logistics, and if you want to bring food from restaurants, it's still only available in very specific areas, mostly in capitals, in the capital and other major cities, because well, I would say the profit is more eminent there. And in relation to logistics, as you said, big trucks and across the country, no, there have been a lot of initiatives. I wouldn't say startups, but companies, yeah, companies that started working in this. That some of them I know personally that have been very successful. A lot of educational initiatives as well, applications for studying, websites. Um, and much more. Yeah, I can't really give examples right now off the back of my head, but there have been a lot of developments in this sector. Yes.
It's good to know that's happening, because I think that this is a massive opportunity space for people in Algeria. I think that the tech world in general, since one, a lot of us come out as engineers out of university, and two, the technical world does not require capital to build things. So you could just open your computer, you could write some code, you could like connect to like a payment processor here. There's going to be some limitations in terms of how are you going to handle payments in Algeria, and there's not much payment infrastructure for Visa and MasterCard. But the idea is this technical digital world, it allows people to build without capital. And I think that for any developing nation that has a lot of smart people, has a lot of resources, does not have any current political threat like war or civil wars, they should take this route. They should take that route to develop their technical infrastructure, because it's going to help a lot of people. It's going to create a lot of jobs, and it's going to be able to bridge people from Algeria to the rest of the world. And it helps, it helps get everybody on the same page in a way. There's a question that we talked before this, but how would you describe the political affiliations of people that are educated, especially when you compare it to the West? Like, we have like capitalists, we have communists, we have socialists, we have all these different categories. What's dominating the idea sphere in Algeria?
That is an incredibly interesting question, and it's also interesting in terms of the fact that there is an emerging generation, it's a Gen Z. I was born in '97, so I am technically considered to be a Gen Z, but I would say that I relate more to millennials than Gen Z, because technology hit Algeria a bit late, so I relate to a lot with the technology that was available early on for millennials abroad, rather than the internet and the new technologies that have been available to the Gen Z generation. And because of this connection that the older generations did not really have to the world, the newest generations that are hitting their early 20s are very, very connected to the Western world, I would say, too. And it's very obvious that the ones that are dominating the virtual space are mostly the liberals. And yeah, we are seeing a lot of liberal movements in Algeria. People truly care about freedom and truly care about the ability to make a choice, and um, being pro-abortion and being extremely feminist, and yeah, we're seeing a lot of liberal movement that is very similar to the Western world, which I personally disagree with. But I believe that it doesn't really focus on our problems, so I think that we really have to we have to try to work with this new generation on that. But with the oldest generations, I would say is where it gets a bit more interesting because everyone is very different. Everyone comes from a very different backgrounds. And when I say an older generation, I'm not going much further back. And I will stick with my generation, early 90s, millennials mostly, especially the late millennials, I would say. I don't know. I believe that they are the most complicated or the most nuanced because they came in between these two new trends where the older generation, the generation of my parents, for example, and my grandparents, obviously very authoritarian, very conservative, has a certain degree of a French influence, and so a certain degree of liberty of choice with very specific cultural inclinations towards I really don't know how to explain it, but there are very specific things to French culture and the way and the way of doing things and the way of interaction that is very North African Mediterranean. But other than that, yeah, conservative, authoritarian. My generation that comes in between of that conservatism and this new trend of liberalism, we see a lot of different people across the spectrum, and we see people that are very conservative and authoritarian, but also liberal in very specific manners. And so you find people that are pro-abortion and for example still believe in those very um, the core values of what a family is. We have people that are anarchists, but at the same time, to a certain extent, believe in the importance of keeping a government. And I think this is interesting because because we've started to kind of disconnect our theoretical ideas, and the things that we believe in theoretically. For example, okay, I believe in anarchy, or I believe in the importance of liberalism, but then the things that we apply to society and the things that we believe that actually work for our society are very different. So, for example, I would say yes, I believe that the ability to take one's choice, to be free in life, is very important. But if that brings problems to the society in which you live, then I will start to disconnect a bit from that. And so, yes, the youngest generation is liberal. The very older generation is conservative. The generation in between enjoys a multitude of affiliation, that and the interesting thing about it is that our ability to do this, our ability to disconnect our theoretical affiliation from what we would like to apply to our society.
This reminds me about a lot of the people have said to me, because I argue. Sometimes I don't make sense. People say that I'm giving contradictory terms to explain what I think, and in regards to the way I live my life. And I do think that comes from North Africa, because uh, this leads into a question that I've been wanting to ask for a while. But from my specific, we're a very multicultural, multi-ethnical country. My people come from the mountains. They they're called Berber or Amazigh. The word literally translates to freedom, and I feel that like very, very much. I feel like this huge drive towards being free in any circumstance. But then at the same time, I do believe in the sacred powers of socialism, and the ability to get people together and to create groups and safety nets to support people. So they're very contradictory, but I see this with all of my friends. I see this in you a little bit. So it's good to know that I'm not alone in this. The next thing I kind of wanted to talk about was.
Sharif, if you'd
Go ahead.
only allow me also to speak further about this point, I think
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think that it comes from the fact that our societies reached a point where we are developed, but many aspects of our society is not developed. We are very close to, and we have historically also been extremely close to very developed societies in Europe and yeah, mainly in Europe. And so we have been able to very closely analyze and be influenced by these quote unquote modern way to do things, right? But not everyone in our society could follow that. And I think because of this very interesting level in which we stand, that we can understand what it is to be more developed, quote unquote, once again, to what because then what is really developed is a much more complicated question to answer. But yeah, and then a small portion of your society tries to push things forward, but still, because of our very collectivistic nature, we tend to accommodate everyone that's around us. And I think that is where we kind of, yeah, see this contrast in our thinking. We're able to move much faster, but because of our values, that we do things that are kind of contradictory to the things that we think.
We're in a very strange part of the world, and I would say that being a country, so we've been a country for a long time, but on paper, on maps, we've only really been a country for 100 years, because of colonization and what happened in that period. Um, I admire the this unrelenting desire to be free and to be the leaders of ourselves and to be self-sufficient, and to have everything kind of built internally and to trust the people around us. But I do see like it's taking a lot more time
Hmm.
because of these contradictions and because of these like because we lack cohesion as a society. We're too scattered. I think. I don't know. This is again. This is getting a bit too deep into the Algerian politics. Most people are not going to even know. Okay, you know something. So when I go outside here, and at the beginning, like the first couple of years, I would tell people like I'm because they would always ask me where are you from because I do look a little bit not American. So I
European.
say Algeria. I say northern African, and then people are like, but you're not. They
Not
assume
black.
that pretty much everybody. Yeah, that's something I get a lot. Like you're not black. How light skinned but also African. And if they knew the complexity of like that, just that country where we
Or,
have
yeah.
we have Berbers, we have sub-Saharan Africans, we have Africans, we have Arabs that have migrated over hundreds of years. From Saudi Arabia and in the Arabian Peninsula, we have people from the Middle East. We have people that are descendants of the French and the Greeks, and it's just such a mixed place that I feel like we lack cohesion in a shared national identity, which
Yeah.
I don't see being a problem outside.
But I mean, we also have to keep. I mean, yes, as you said, we have been colonized for a really long time, and colonization, in a way or another, breaks that sense of identity or scatters it to a certain extent. But also before that, North Africa and Africa in general, and even Europe, much if we go back in time enough, have lived in these smaller communities and tribes and smaller pieces of lands. And colonization comes in and regroups all of that under one identity. And then when the people come together and fight the colonizer out, um, but they didn't really, the society, the culture didn't have time to evolve a unified sense of identity. And that's exactly what happened to Algeria. Algeria is the largest country in Africa. It has three different types of climate, a Mediterranean climate, and then one that is how do we call, like that, one that is more moderate, and a Saharian one. um,
Yeah.
and this is kind of, and this obviously implies that there are multiple different cultures, multiple different traditions, and we can see that. And fortunately, we have succeeded in creating that sense of identity that we're strengthening every day further. But yeah, once again, Algeria only gained independence 62, 63 years ago, and in my opinion, we have made very a very good amount of development for this short amount of time.
The fact that we recovered, there's a lot of pieces of land across the world that were traditionally owned by some sort of people and then got colonized and never really returned back to
Mhm.
what it was. The fact that we were able to sort of claim back the land and the culture and rebuild the pieces, I think it's very admirable on a global stage. I always want to share this information with people from the outside. I'm really happy I can do it in a podcast form because it's easier to talk about it, especially since we're using English. I wonder how much different this conversation would be if we were talking in Arabic. It would be very different, I think. Um, Sorry, jumping around a lot. I want to continue
That's
talking about
politically
freedom
correct. More difficult, I would say.
in Arabic.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because I don't know. I feel like when we use Arabic terms, people can get more offended because they can, if obviously if the audience is Algerian, it would be much difficult to say a couple of things. People just they don't accept me saying, for example, the Algerian identity is still developing. People would have a problem with that if I and I would feel a bit weird to say it in Darja, which is not Arabic, by the way. Uh, People would get offended. People would most likely be more offended than when I say it in English.
There's a good balance to have when you're like talking about politically correct. But at the same time, I think that sensitivity is not a very good trait that
Hmm.
people have. I think even when you look at the stereotypes of people from North Africa and the Middle East and other Arabic countries, other culturally Muslim countries, one of the biggest things that people criticize is the sensitivity. We're very sensitive to any type of criticism, to
Yeah,
any sort of like thought that kind of deviates from the norm,
yeah,
which I personally feel like there's a lack. It slows things down, and I
very much.
I hope that people become more open though.
Yes, yes, for sure. I don't really think much about it. We've always been very sensitive. We've always been very sensitive. It's the norm for us.
So, in regards to freedom, do you, as a woman in Algeria, feel free?
Um, you're gonna have to be more specific with your question. I feel free in relation to my political or the potential political participation. I feel free in the job market. I feel very much appreciated. Absolutely no problems. Absolutely no problem finding work or adjusting to work. No sexism in a workplace and no wage gap. No nothing of that sort. Um, oh, Admittedly, I would also say that the wage gap doesn't exist in the same manner in the West. But I think where I don't feel free, which is something that I don't have a problem with to a large extent, is culturally. Of course, I have to in a sense bow down to a lot of traditions, to a lot of cultural understandings, to my family. I have to ensure that I don't act in a way that is disrespectful to my parents, that would hurt my parents in the way they think. So we're not extremely free in comparison to the West, because even people in the West are not 100% free. But we're definitely less. free, culturally speaking, than the Western societies. Yes, Sharif, did you want to say something?
So,
Please
so
do interrupt me whenever you want.
no, it's okay. I like the guest talk because the point of the interview is that I just ask you the questions and you provide the information. You have a lot more information on this than I do, and I kind of respect your expertise in it. I want to understand, and I kind of want to show to the world what things are like because it's a lot easier to explain things in this way than it is to like, okay, you need to understand thousands of years of history of culture to be able to kind of get to where we are. And if we just have a nice conversation where I try to like poke at these little things, you are able to do that much better than I would. When I think about a woman's role in Algerian society, I think that there is a lot of responsibilities put on a woman, and there's a lot of restrictions also put on a woman and expectations that don't align between the sexes. And some of that, it exists in the West, it exists in the East. It's a cultural, like a worldwide thing. But when I think about our country, like we give a lot of respect to women. Like a mother is one of the most respected people in society, in my opinion, if not the most respected person. Women are always talked positively about. I do think that, like you said, sexual assault and sexual harassment is a lot less in the workplace and education. We're very well socialized, but those restrictions, in my opinion, and restrictions in language as well. I feel like that they hurt a lot, and maybe you're not experiencing that because you're there. And I kind of wanted to get your opinion on it. Do you think that is something that is changing over time? Is it getting better?
Listen, Sharif, I've always said this to a lot of people here. Especially in terms of the rules and regulations that rule the country, in terms of political participation, I started with it because it's really important. We have a lot of regulations that are unfair sometimes to men, in advantage to women, to push women towards political participation. I'm not saying that that is a bad thing. I'm saying that that is a good thing. It's a necessary thing. It's not a fair thing, but it's a necessary thing. We have some problems in the family laws, for example. Much of it, though. For example, a woman cannot directly divorce, but she has to go through another route to be able to get what she wants. Um, a woman doesn't necessarily have custody directly over her children, and yeah, we have problems like these, and I would argue to a certain extent, many women, and this is actually also a problem that I would love to work in or collect data about, is that many women, even not men, prefer to live this way to a certain extent because it follows, especially, um, a certain way of doing that is Islamic, you know. And if you're a Muslim woman living in a Muslim society and you don't want the majority doesn't, in a democratic society, the majority doesn't want these laws to change, it becomes a bit difficult to apply liberal understanding of how society should be ruled in advantage of women, when many others do not want that to be the case. And so this is a topic that is incredibly complicated. Yes, we have freedom to a certain extent. If you have independence, if you have financial freedom, no one can touch you as a woman. If you don't, you are very vulnerable to your family, to your culture, and to your society. We don't. I mean, our society is not underdeveloped, and so not much, not extreme violence towards. I mean, at a large scale, obviously, in a smaller scale, we would always suffer from violence against women. But at a larger scale, if a woman wants to leave her house and she is financially independent, she can do that. What we would like to see also, so that we can grant to women more freedom in our society, is more help for the women that cannot afford it themselves. Um, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for answering. I know these are touchy topics. It helps to get your perspective on this because, again, the shared consensus in the West is that women in North Africa and Middle East do not have any freedoms, that they're being treated badly, and I think that this comes from like a misconstrued way of thinking about feminism in the West, where people, yeah, one of the go-tos response to any feminist movement is look at what's happening in Muslim countries. Why do you not focus on that? And hearing it from somebody that lives there, that
Yeah.
the truth is that we do have a lot of positive things. There are a lot of rights that women have. There's a lot of advantages that they have in society that women in the West do not have. Specifically, this thing about education and how many people actually finish university.
Mhm.
So it's good to hear that.
Um,
Thank you for talking about.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I would love to speak just a bit further about it because it's and once again, obviously these are my opinions. I would say that a lot of feminists in my society would disagree with me largely on many of these topics. Let me just give one example in relation to political participation once again because I should have. It's very important. Like for example, for people that because you just said that there isn't really similar laws in the United States, for example. For example, in Algeria, one out of each three people from each political party that have been voted into the parliament has to be a woman. And so here to ensure that there is political participation, if there are three men that gained the most votes in your political party, then not all three can go, but the fourth women that have been voted has to take the third place and be granted a place in the parliament. And there are other laws that are similar to this one that ensures that women get their place in society. This is necessary because our culture works to a certain extent against women, and it's very difficult for women to find the power to fight certain cultural tendencies. And so within the law, we try to ensure that the women that have a little bit of momentum can be further pushed in. Um, in relation to Arab countries and the view that the West has about in relation to feminism in developing countries or Arab countries, I would say that there is, especially when it comes to this topic, there is a very, very, very significant contrast between North African societies and Middle Eastern societies. I believe that the West is more familiar with Middle Eastern societies, as I would believe that you would agree with me. In North Africa, the culture is very, very different, or different to a certain extent, especially when it comes to this topic. We have Tuareg, for example, who is a tribe that lives mainly in the very southern parts of the Algerian Sahara and the northern parts of, I believe, Libya, and the people that take the decisions within these tribes are actually women, not men. In the very northern parts of the country as well, yes, we do adhere to culture and a lot of uh, um, we'd have to listen to men, and men are more likely to be leading the society, but women are not undervalued. They have, as you said, a very important role to play in a society that is much more understood in our societies than I would say in Arab societies, where for some reason we appreciate the role of a woman, of a woman, especially inside of the house. I would have to say that yes, we do put the emphasis a lot on the importance of a woman to be inside of her house, taking care of the family. But that is not all bad. And as I said, also the government have been trying to leap or to change that a little bit. And Also an important part of this, and I think what contributed majorly into trying to take the woman out of the household is the civil war, and the fact that Algerians didn't have access to education during colonization and after and then prior as well. And it kind of created within our society this momentum where everyone understood, or families and the fathers in the families understood the importance of their women having access to education and being independent, because the country went through so many problems, struggled a lot with colonization and with civil war afterwards for a decade, that everyone now is scared so much of going back, or of living in bad circumstances, that they understood that everyone, and women included, have to have access to education, have to have access to financial independence, and that's what moved societies forward, in contrast to what I would say the experience would be in the Middle East today.
I think I can resonate with a lot of that, specifically about the part where people there have lived through so many trials that at this point they are single-mindedly focused on moving forward without that happening again. And you can see it in the way that people behave when they are trying to do something. There's been some protests a couple of years back in Algeria, and I was watching to understand what's going on, and I knew there was these like social movements of you clean up everything
Yeah.
after you protest.
Yes.
And this is something that, like, if you look north 500 miles from Algiers to Paris right now, people are burning things down, or trash is piling up. They're really destroying
The city.
their environment.
Mhm.
And the same stuff happens in America, where people, they go out for a cause that is actually meaningful, that can actually do change, but instead of focusing on the point, they have to destroy things and loot things and cause all of these problems and
Mhm.
threaten and harm people, shoot guns. I think that contrast, that I feel like we are moving in a very good direction, and we're one of the countries in the world right now that is on the up and not the down.
Yeah.
There's a lot of civilizations that we look at as advanced that are on a down slope,
Yeah.
and maybe America's one of them.
I would, the
And
Congress.
we're moving in a different direction. So, I guess this is the last question that I have scripted, and anything else, if you want to keep talking, that's fine with me. But where do you think Algeria is heading politically in the next 20 years? Do you think we're going to be moving towards a more open political system where we do fair trade with the world, like easy import, easy export, pro-business, pro-capitalist? Or are we moving towards something like China, where everybody collectively works towards a common goal?
Mhm.
And does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Yes. No, I do not think that we are going to be moving towards a free, extremely free market, very liberal, very westernized. I think. Obviously, I'm not an expert, but I don't think it needs an expert to see that Algeria, first of all, we don't have any imports. We are working, I mean, the current government is working hard to ensure that the country is self-sufficient, and that the national production is of all goods, from food to agriculture to all types of industrialized food and clothing and water. Like, obviously, when it comes to electricity and gas, Algeria is very comfortable in that manner. But I think in contrast to the economic models that have been adopted by Morocco, for example, and Jordan, as I said, Tunisia to a certain extent as well, where the collaboration and the friendships are stronger with the West. Algeria's friendships are even if we don't admit it directly and we say that we're mostly a neutral country, and yes, our diplomacy majorly relies on that, on always having a neutral stand in all international problems, but our friends are Chinese and Russians most of the time. But we hold also strong relations with the United States and Canada and the UK and well, France. I didn't finish the
So,
sentence. But because there's actually a very recent interview of our president talking to Al Jazeera, Khadija Ben Ginna, very ironically, actually, for people that who knows Khadija Ben Ginna, she's one of the Algerian reporters in Al Jazeera, and our president actually have not recently, a couple of years ago, talked about her and said that she said a couple of bad things about Algeria. And today we saw that he actually accepted to go on an interview with her, and that's it. For me personally, is something that I appreciate and I really like. And one of the questions was this: what is the relation, or how do you want Algeria to how do you see the relations with France in the upcoming years? I unfortunately don't remember the answer, but right now the diplomatic relations are not very stable, and I think our ambassador is not yet back in France. But yeah, I think the steps forward for Algeria is a strong national production, definitely strong diplomatic stance on many different international causes, and especially autonomy. Yeah, autonomy is very important. Away from China, away from Russia, away from any other country. I think it's very clear that the Algerian government appreciates or majorly focuses on ensuring that our especially internal matters are ours, and to be able to have a strong stance about our internal matters, we have to be self-sufficient.
okay, so many things to unpack here. From the start, and I see this too. I see it going in a more collectivist way. I think people there are going to be united and work towards the goal of self-sufficiency and neutrality on the global scale. I think our culture is very, I wouldn't say closed off, but I think it's like already established, and it's not looking to mingle much with the rest of the world, which I believe is fine. There's examples of this in Europe with Switzerland. There's examples of this in South America where people just want to focus on themselves, and I think that that's a really good direction to go. There is one place that I really do think Algeria has a lot of potential, and I think that if it takes advantage of the opportunity, we could see a lot of growth in terms of wealth and standard of living for people within the country, and that is specifically banking. So the way that Muslim countries deal with banking, in my opinion, is way better than the way Americans deal with banking. The fact that in America we have the Federal Reserve, which just prints money whenever they feel like they need it. They don't have to justify it to anybody. They don't have to warn anybody. Banks are not obligated to keep your money. They can lend it out. Lending and interest and credit, all of these things are very, very unstable processes that we are basically pushing along down the road until at some point we can't push any further and it's going to kind of collapse, in my opinion. I mean, it sounds dramatic, but it's not in a really dramatic. This is happening over hundreds of years, and I think it'll be fine. But if Algeria takes this stance of neutrality that Switzerland has taken, and it takes this in my opinion, fair banking, where the government does not loan you money for interest. There's zero interest loans if you want them. The government sort of holds your money and doesn't actually move it around. We have a very strong treasury in regards to we collect money from all over the world and hold it. So these stances could benefit the rest of the world and could provide to the world a safe haven in the middle of the world, like literally in the middle of the map. a nice safe haven, good banking, reliable people, neutral political stances. If we take that, I think we would be great. But I don't know. I don't think I see our country doing that.
Yeah, no. I honestly am not very well informed in relation to this topic, but I know that inside of the country, exactly as you said, you can take loans if there are a variety of different banks, by the way, not only Algerians, but you can take loans with interest. Most of the times, if you want to buy a car, also there is a certain level of interest, I would say. The in the largest bank, the Algerian bank, because there are two. There's the La Banque d'Algérie Nationale, the National Algerian Bank, and there's a bank that is kind of. I honestly don't know. I don't know the exact translation in English, but especially the public workers use it. It's called CCP or La Poste. And within this specific bank, your money is not moved around. So there are a variety of different options, apparently.
Yeah, I would hope countries look at that and actually see the value in it. And I think that it's very rare to have these banks that will actually hold your money and not move it around, especially where we're from. This is a massive issue right now with this, global inflation problem. Anyway, oh my God, I feel like my brain is just so full of stuff now. Ugh. Thank you for talking about this, Elkhansaa. I really hope that you feel like you had the opportunity to share information about our country and our future. I learned a lot.
Thanks, thank you so much. I wished I could have been sometimes more clear, and sometimes I should have given more examples. I honestly, maybe I've gotten used to speaking to Algerians most of the times, so I would jump over information here and there. But thank you so much for having me. The topics were amazing. I wished we could go more in depth into each topic individually, but maybe in the future. Let me know. I thank you so much for having me once again.
If you ever feel like yeah, again, it's like a PC thing, but if you ever feel like having me on your Algerian podcast, well, it's just a podcast, but yours, I think I would be interested in talking. I would really like to try. I haven't talked for a long time in Arabic in so long,
Yes.
and I think that there's different information that you could. I don't know. There's so much more stuff that you could say in different languages.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Yeah, I heard you speak in Darja, by the way, before starting the podcast, and I was like, okay, Sharif, now you have an accent, so you do have this like
Oh yeah,
accent.
yeah. I mean, I don't even know
You've
to my family.
been living abroad for a long time, but still, your Darja is still
Yeah.
pretty good. Obviously, you lived here for a long time as well.
I will be coming back. I can't wait to actually travel around North Africa with my current perspective. I think it'll be very
It'll be
interesting.
amazing. We'll hang out downtown Algiers Center as we used to do back in 2016.
We sure will.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna tell the bot to leave now. And then just a second.